Elena Park sat in the sleek, modern conference hall at the United Nations, watching the most extraordinary meeting in human history unfold. Across the table sat 3 Velanthi ambassadors, their porcelain-white skin gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Their long, willowy limbs folded neatly, and their deep-set obsidian eyes radiated an unsettling calm. These creatures, who had emerged from nowhere, claimed to have come in peace. Their message, delivered just a week ago, promised gifts beyond human imagination. Limitless energy, said Velanthi Ambassador Velanthi, his voice smooth like a breeze over glass. Fusion reactors with no environmental impact. Quantum communication networks to eliminate all barriers of distance. And of course, he leaned forward with an eerie smile. The cure for every known human disease. A murmur rippled through the room. Leaders from the world's greatest powers exchanged glances. Generals whispered with scientists, presidents with ministers. For Earth, trapped in the grinding gears of poverty, pollution, pandemics, and energy crises, this offer was nothing short of a miracle. Elena shifted in her seat, uneasy. She wasn't a scientist or a politician, just a cultural attaché, brought along to represent the arts and humanities in this historic negotiation. Yet from the moment the Velanthi had begun speaking, she felt something wasn't right. Ambassador Veltak's smile widened. We offer these gifts freely, without war or conquest. All we ask, his black eyes sparkled with a predatory gleam, is exclusive ownership of your culture. A hush fell over the room. What exactly does that mean? Asked Secretary General McAllen, breaking the silence. His tone was cautious but intrigued. It's quite simple, Veltak replied. From this day forward, all forms of human creativity, music, literature, paintings, films, scientific discoveries will belong to us. You may still produce art, of course, but the rights, the essence, the ownership, that will be ours. A collective gasp echoed around the chamber. Why? President Ramirez of Brazil demanded. What does art have to do with fusion reactors and vaccines? Veltak tilted his head, as if amused by the question. Our civilization places immense value on cultural production. Creativity fuels us in ways your world has yet to understand. It is the one resource you have that we need. A murmur of confusion swept through the room. The Velanthi weren't asking for gold or minerals, nor land or military control. They wanted art, music, stories, inventions, the very soul of humanity. Elena's heart raced. This wasn't just about paintings on a wall or music on a streaming service. They were offering unimaginable technology in exchange for Earth's imagination. And the way they spoke about it, as if art were just another commodity to be traded, chilled her to the core. A German diplomat cleared his throat. To clarify, you're asking for exclusive rights? You mean future works too? Yes, Veltak replied. All existing art will be archived under our care. Future creations will belong to us the moment they are born. In return, you will receive everything your civilization has ever dreamed of. A loud conversation erupted as diplomats and ministers argued across the table. Elena could feel the weight of the decision pressing down like a storm cloud. It's a small price to pay, said a British trade minister. We'll still be able to create. Nothing really changes except that our work will be licensed differently. Licensed to aliens, snapped the French delegate. Let's not be sentimental, a scientist from Japan countered. This is a chance to leap centuries ahead in technology. We're talking about eradicating cancer and stopping climate change. Exactly, the U.S. Secretary of State added. Imagine a world without disease or poverty. What's a few symphonies compared to that? Elena sat silently, fingers clenched under the table. She knew how seductive this offer must seem to the others. Leaders who'd spent their lives dealing with crises, weighing lives against impossible choices. A cure for cancer, clean energy, faster than light travel. They were being offered a future free of the burdens that had plagued humanity for centuries. But at what cost? The Velanthi ambassadors sat patiently, their expressions unreadable. They were in no hurry. Why would they be? They knew the humans would be tempted. Elena leaned toward Ambassador Veltak, unable to keep her thoughts inside any longer. What if someone creates something new without your permission? She asked. Veltak smiled again, but this time it felt colder, as if the air in the room had dropped a few degrees. Unauthorized works will simply cease to exist. A shiver ran down Elena's spine. The casual finality of his words terrified her. The Velanthi weren't just asking to collect art. They intended to control it. Everything humans made from this moment forward would belong to someone else. The idea was suffocating, like a heavy curtain being pulled over the world's collective imagination. We need time to deliberate, Secretary General McCallan said, trying to restore some semblance of order. We'll take a vote in 2 weeks. The Velanthi bowed gracefully, rising from their seats in unison. Of course. But remember, the longer you wait, the more you delay your salvation. With that, they glided silently from the room, leaving the humans to debate their future. As soon as the doors closed, the room erupted into heated arguments. Some saw the deal as a necessary evil, an inconvenient trade-off for a better world. Others, like Elena, were horrified by the idea of giving away humanity's creativity. It's just art, a corporate lobbyist sneered. How many people even listen to symphonies these days? That's not the point, Elena snapped, surprising herself with the intensity of her voice. Art isn't just decoration, it's who we are. It's how we express love, pain, hope, and everything in between. Without it, what's left of us? The others stared at her, some nodding, others rolling their eyes. She knew she was fighting an uphill battle. To the people in this room, art was a luxury, something to admire after the real work was done. They didn't see that creativity was more than entertainment. It was the driving force behind every breakthrough, every revolution, every leap forward humanity had ever made. But how could she make them understand that? Secretary General McCallan rubbed his temples. Look, we're not making a decision today. Elena, I want you to reach out to the cultural community, artists, musicians, writers, get a sense of where they stand. We need to know what we're dealing with before we finalize anything. Elena nodded, though her heart felt heavy. She knew what most artists would say. They'd reject the deal outright. But she also knew their voices wouldn't carry the same weight as promises of free energy and miracle cures. The meeting adjourned, and the diplomats filed out, leaving Elena alone at the table, lost in thought. As she gathered her things, the words of the Velanthi ambassador echoed in her mind. Unauthorized works will simply cease to exist. She felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss she couldn't fully comprehend. On one side lay a future of boundless technology, free from the burdens of sickness and scarcity. On the other, the slow, silent death of the human spirit. For the first time in her career, Elena Park had no idea what the right answer was, and time was running out. Elena Park sat on a wooden bench in the middle of an art gallery, surrounded by strange sculptures and experimental paintings. But she wasn't here to admire them. She was here to recruit allies. The Velanthi's offer weighed heavily on her, and she knew the artist she spoke with today might hold the key to stopping it. Across from her sat Serena, a sculptor famous for her wild, abstract creations, twisted metal and stained glass welded into bizarre shapes. Serena crossed her arms and gave Elena a skeptical look. "They want what exactly?" Serena asked, leaning forward. "Exclusive ownership of all art, music, literature, anything creative," Elena explained. "The future works too. They're offering limitless technology in exchange." Serena snorted. "So they want us to become their personal jukebox? Sorry, but I don't see the appeal." "That's what I need your help with," Elena said. "A lot of world leaders are ready to take the deal. They think it's worth it." "Idiots," Serena muttered, shaking her head. "They don't get it. Creativity isn't some side hustle you can hand over like spare change." Elena sighed. That was exactly the problem. Too many people didn't understand the value of art until it was gone. She thanked Serena and left the gallery, her mind racing. She had a long list of artists, musicians, and writers to meet today, and she needed to find the words to convince them that this wasn't just a political issue. It was a battle for humanity's soul. Later that afternoon, Elena found herself in a dimly lit jazz club, sitting across from Malcolm, a saxophonist with a reputation for brilliance and stubborn independence. The scent of whiskey and cigarette smoke lingered in the air. Malcolm leaned back in his chair, tapping a cigarette against the edge of an ashtray. "Let me get this straight. They want to take everything we make, all the music, all the stories, and we don't own any of it anymore?" "Exactly," Elena nodded. Malcolm said, lighting the cigarette and taking a slow drag. "Sounds like a corporate record deal, except it's with aliens." Elena chuckled, though her heart wasn't in it. "Yeah, and just like those deals, there's no going back if we sign it." Malcolm blew a stream of smoke into the air. "No way, they're out of their minds if they think they can buy something like jazz. Jazz ain't just music, it's life. It's struggle, joy, improvisation. How are they going to own that?" Elena smiled, appreciating his passion. "That's what I need people to understand. We won't just lose our art, we'll lose everything that makes it ours." Malcolm nodded slowly. "Thing is, kid, Most folks won't get it. They think art's just pretty pictures on walls or songs on the radio. They don't realize it's what keeps the world spinning. Elena's chest tightened. Malcolm was right. Convincing the public and the politicians was going to be a lot harder than she thought. That night, Elena met with Leo, her oldest friend and one of the only people she could trust completely. They sat in a cramped coffee shop where Leo nursed a cappuccino and fiddled with his notebook, scribbling story ideas in the margins. "So let me guess," Leo said without looking up from his page. "They want us to sell our souls to aliens, pretty much, and everyone's ready to do it because, what, flying cars?" Elena sighed. "Yeah, clean energy, no more disease, faster than light travel. It's hard to argue against that." Leo leaned back and gave her a lopsided grin. "You know what's funny? Without creativity, none of those things would exist. Who do they think invented that stuff in the first place? Scientists are just storytellers with lab coats. Everything starts with imagination." Elena smiled. Leo had always seen the world differently. He was the kind of person who could find poetry in spreadsheets, but the thought of giving up the freedom to create seemed to weigh on him too. "They're taking away the why," Leo said quietly. "What's the point of a perfect world if we can't dream up something better?" Elena rested her chin in her hands. "I know, but not everyone thinks like that. People are tired, Leo. They just want life to be easy. And what happens when they realize easy isn't enough?" Elena had no answer. The weight of the situation felt heavier with every conversation. A few days later, Elena sat across from a Velanthi ambassador in a private meeting room. She was still trying to wrap her head around their obsession with creativity. "What happens if someone creates something without your permission?" she asked, hoping to pin down the exact nature of their control. Velanthi smiled. His expressions always seemed just a little too smooth, like they were rehearsed. "Unauthorized works will cease to exist," he said, his voice as calm as ever. "Cease to exist?" Elena repeated, her stomach twisting. "Yes," Velanthi said, as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. "There will be no punishment, simply erasure." The words sent a shiver through Elena. The Velanthi weren't just taking ownership, they were offering total control. They would erase anything they couldn't possess. Creativity would become a prisoner, locked away behind alien bars. Elena felt sick. She excused herself from the meeting and stepped into the hallway, leaning against the cool wall as she tried to steady her breath. This wasn't just about art. It was about freedom, the freedom to express, to imagine, to be. And if the Velanthi got their way, that freedom would vanish, replaced by perfection, wrapped in chains. Elena decided to meet with more artists, hoping to gather enough support to push back against the deal. But the deeper she dug, the clearer it became that many people didn't understand the stakes. Some saw the Velanthi deal as an opportunity. "Imagine the collaborations we could have," one optimistic composer told her. "Alien music, human instruments. It could open up entirely new genres." Others, though, were more cynical. "Does it really matter who owns art?" a gallery owner asked. "Most artists never see a dime from their work anyway." Every conversation made Elena feel more frustrated. She couldn't shake the feeling that the Velanthi weren't just taking art. They were taking the spark of humanity itself. As the days passed, she gathered signatures from musicians, writers, and painters who were willing to protest the deal. But she knew it wouldn't be enough. The diplomats were focused on the tech. They saw a world without disease and poverty, not the slow death of imagination. And Elena knew that once the deal was signed, there would be no going back. Creativity couldn't be reclaimed once it was lost. At the end of a long day, Elena sat with Leo on a park bench, watching the city lights shimmer on the river. "They're going to take it, aren't they?" Leo asked quietly. Elena nodded, feeling the weight of inevitability settle over her. "I think so. No one sees what's really at stake." "Not yet." Leo sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. "Then we'll have to show. We need to remind them what creativity means." Elena looked at him, confused. "How?" Leo smiled, a mischievous, defiant grin. "We're artists, Elena. We'll make something so powerful, so beautiful that no one, not even the Velanthi, can take it away." Elena's heart raced. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they still had a chance to fight back, and they would do it the only way they knew how, through art. Elena sat hunched over her laptop, her screen glowing in the dim light of her cramped apartment. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she didn't care. She was deep in research, diving into every scrap of information she could find about the Velanthi. She scoured obscure online forums, university databases, and ancient mythologies for any trace of alien contact or hints about civilizations like theirs. Leo sat across from her at the tiny kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks, doodles, and half-finished story ideas. They were both exhausted, but neither was willing to stop. "Found anything yet?" Leo asked, rubbing his eyes. His notebook was filled with scrawled notes and sketches, ideas spinning in all directions as he tried to make sense of what they were dealing. "Not much," Elena muttered. "Just the usual PR nonsense. They've made deals with a few other civilizations, always offering technology, always asking for cultural exchange in return. But something feels none of those species seem to be thriving now. Their societies just stop advancing after a certain point. It's like they plateau creatively and culturally." Leo leaned, sensing frustration. "Velanthi aren't just by, they're drained. That's what I'm starting to think. It's like they leave these civilization art people behind it. Invent mad die." She pulled a report from an academic blog detailing alien race, once vibrant and innovative, now live for centuries. They stopped writing new music, stopped telling. Even their architecture hasn't changed in generations. It's like their culture just withered. Leo, that's what the Velanthi want. Not just paintings and they want the spark itself. Exact. Elena leaned back in her chair, running a hand through her hair. They're not they're parasites. They've lost the ability to create, so now they're trying to harvest other world. The realization made her stomach churn. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a vast, dark pit, staring into something ancient. Tapped his pen. Law. Maybe that's why they control. Creativity is messy, unpredictable. Bottle can't be bought. Elena let out a bitter. We're about to hand it, all tied up in a neat little bow. They sat in silence. The enormity of the situation. The vote was only days away, and most of the dip ready to. No one's care about the long. They only saw the shiny better world, clean energy, no more disease, unlimited technology, the ultimate temptation, and they were ready to traverse. "We have to stop," Leo said, his voice low. "We can't let them drain. They did those other civilizations." "I know, but I don't think in us. They think creativity is just a luxury, something they can give up without losing anything important." She stared at her lap, feeling the weight of defeat pressing down on her chest. "They don't understand that it's everything. Without it, we won't invent, we won't grow, we won't dream." Leo leaned back in his chair, drumming his fingers on the table. "Then we need to make them understand. We need to show them what's really at stake." He grinned, that mischievous spark in his eyes that always appeared when he had a crazy idea. "What if we create something so powerful, so alive, that even the Velanthi can't steal it? Something they can't own, no matter how hard they try." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Like what? A painting? A song?" "All of it," Leo said. "A masterpiece. A work that defies ownership. Something so collaborative, so full of soul, that it's bigger than any one person. Bigger than even the Velanthi." Elena blinked, surprised by the audacity of the idea. But the more she thought about it, the more it made sense. Art wasn't just a product. It was an experience, a shared moment between creator and audience. Maybe, just maybe, they could create something that couldn't be controlled. "But we don't have time," Elena said, biting her lip. "The vote's in 3 days. Even if we start now, we don't need time." Leo interrupted. "We just need people. We need musicians, dancers, writers, coders, anyone who can contribute something. If we all create together, in one big explosion of creativity, we can make something they can't touch." Elena felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. It was reckless, it was impossible, but it was also the only plan they had. "Okay," she said, nodding. "Let's do it." They spent the rest of the night making calls, reaching out to every artist, musician, and creator they knew. Some were skeptical, others intrigued, but slowly the momentum began to build. By morning, they had dozens of people on board, and the number was growing with every phone call and message. Musicians dusted off old instruments. Writers opened their laptops, words pouring onto the page. Painters set up their easels, brushes flying across canvas. It wasn't just about creating something beautiful. It was about defiance, about saying, "This is ours. You can't take it from us." Elena worked side by side with them, coordinating the chaos, pulling everyone together. She hadn't written anything in years. Diplomacy had taken over her life, but now she found herself scribbling poetry on napkins, her words raw and messy but full of heart. Leo composed a haunting melody on his guitar, a song that felt like a cry of freedom. The Velanthi, sensing the surge of creative energy, grew restless. Elena could feel their presence pressing down like a storm on the horizon, as if they were waiting, watching. She knew they wouldn't interfere directly. They didn't need to. All they had to do was wait for the vote, and everything would be handed to them willingly. But Elena refused to give up. She and Leo stayed up for 2 days straight, fueled by adrenaline and sheer stubbornness. They gathered dancers, filmmakers, coders, and graffiti artists. Every medium, every style. Nothing was off limits. They poured their hearts into the project, creating something wild and alive, something that defied logic and expectations. As the deadline approached, Tensions ran high. Arguments broke out. Some artists wanted the piece to be a political statement. Others wanted it to focus purely on beauty. But in the end, they all agreed on one thing. It had to be real. No compromises. No half measures. It had to be the purest expression of who they were. Finally, on the eve of the vote, the masterpiece was complete. It wasn't just one thing, it was everything. A symphony woven into a mural, poetry stitched into a dance, code transformed into music. It was messy, chaotic, and utterly human. Elena stood in the center of the room, surrounded by exhausted artists and creators. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe. "We did it," she whispered. Leo grinned, slinging his guitar over his shoulder. "Yeah, we did." But as they prepared to unveil their work to the world, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that the Velanthi were still watching, waiting. And she knew, deep in her bones, that the battle wasn't over yet. The night before the vote, the masterpiece was ready. Elena stood in the middle of an old theater, surrounded by musicians, painters, dancers, filmmakers, and coders, each of them exhausted but exhilarated. The massive artwork sprawled across every surface. Painted canvases stretched across the walls, musical scores taped to the stage, digital projections flickering on screens. The room buzzed with the hum of guitars tuning, strings plucked experimentally, and dancers stretching their limbs for one last rehearsal. It was messy, chaotic, and beautiful. Everything that made humanity what it was. Leo sat on the edge of the stage, plucking at his guitar, eyes closed, humming the melody that had become the emotional heart of the entire project. Elena's poem, raw and unpolished, was embedded in the performance, interwoven with film clips, live music, dance, and code-generated visuals. It wasn't just art, it was rebellion, an act of defiance against the idea that creativity could be owned. Every contributor had poured their soul into it, and the result was something extraordinary. The plan was simple but risky. They would live stream the masterpiece to the entire world, and more importantly to the Velanthi, just hours before the vote. If this creation resonated with enough people, it might shift the tide. Elena didn't need everyone to understand the deeper message. She just needed them to feel something. If they could show the world what was at stake, what humanity would lose if creativity became a commodity, they might still have a chance. "Ready?" Leo asked, opening his eyes and looking at Elena with a tired but determined smile. She gave a small nod, her heart pounding. "As ready as we'll ever be." The artists gathered, instruments in hand, brushes still stained with paint, laptops glowing with open code. No one knew exactly how the performance would unfold. That was part of the magic. It would be improvised in real time, with each artist feeding off the others. A living creation that no one person could control. Elena took a deep breath and stepped to the side of the stage, giving Leo a thumbs up. He strummed the first chord on his guitar, and the live stream went live. Across the world, people tuned in, some curious, others skeptical. The performance began. Leo's haunting melody drifted through the air like a whisper, joined by a violin's soft wail and the tap-tap-tap of drumsticks on wood. A dancer leaped onto the stage, her movements fluid and wild, as if she were painting with her body. Behind her, projectors threw vibrant images onto the walls, fractals spinning, galaxies unfolding, the faces of people laughing, crying, shouting. Elena's poem appeared on screen, her messy handwriting scrawled across a digital canvas. "We are more than machines that eat and sleep. We are dreams stitched together by broken hearts." As the performance built momentum, more musicians joined in, adding layers to the music. Guitars, saxophones, pianos, strange digital beats coded in real time by hackers sitting in the wings. The sounds crashed together in chaotic harmony, each note lifting the next, rising higher and higher. A filmmaker projected raw footage of city streets at night, flickering neon signs, lovers kissing under streetlights, protests unfolding in slow motion. The visuals wove in and out of the music like memories, fragmented, imperfect, but deeply human. Dancers moved across the stage, their bodies colliding and separating, mirroring the ebb and flow of life itself. The audience, those watching from their homes and phones, felt something shift inside them. This wasn't just entertainment, it was a reminder of everything that couldn't be measured or sold. The joy of creation, the thrill of discovery, the ache of love and loss. In the control room at the back of the theater, Elena kept one eye on the live stream's viewership numbers. They were skyrocketing, tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. People from every corner of the globe tuning in to witness something unlike anything they'd ever seen. Messages poured into the comment sections. "What is this? It's incredible. This is life. This is us." The Velanthi were watching too. Elena could feel their presence like a cold wind creeping through the cracks in the walls. She imagined them sitting in their sleek ships, those unblinking black eyes staring at the performance. What were they thinking? Were they impressed, enraged, afraid? Suddenly, the digital projections flickered, just for a moment. Like a glitch in the Matrix, Elena's heart skipped a beat. She knew what it meant. The Velanthi were trying to interfere. They had sensed what the artists were doing, creating something they couldn't predict, couldn't control. The aliens might not understand all the intricacies of human creativity, but they recognized danger when they saw it. The musicians felt the glitch, too. Leo shot a glance at Elena, his fingers pausing on the strings for a fraction of a second. Elena nodded, signaling him to keep going. The show had to continue. If they stopped now, everything would be lost. Leo strummed harder, his music turning fierce and urgent, as if daring the Velanthi to try again. The other musicians followed his lead, their instruments roaring in defiance. The dancers moved faster, their bodies spinning in wild circles, as if chasing something just out of reach. On screen, Elena's poem shifted, new words appearing in real time, written by someone backstage. "You cannot own what is alive. You cannot cage what refuses to stop moving." The glitch returned, more aggressive this time. The digital visuals flickered and warped, as if the Velanthi were trying to corrupt the feed. But something strange happened. The music pushed back. The rhythm of the performance seemed to fight against the interference, resisting it in ways no one had expected. It was as if the very act of creation was protecting itself. The musicians played louder. The dancers moved faster. The poem expanded, scrolling across the screen in jagged lines. "We are not perfect. We are not eternal. But we are free." The audience could feel it. The struggle, the resistance, and suddenly something clicked. The viewers realized this wasn't just a performance, it was a fight for survival, for identity, for what it meant to be human. In that moment, people across the world understood what was at stake. They saw the Velanthi's offer for what it truly was, a trap disguised as salvation. The comment section exploded with support. "Don't sign the deal. Creativity is priceless. This is what makes us human." In the final moments of the performance, Leo played his guitar as if his life depended on it. The dancers fell to their knees, panting, their bodies gleaming with sweat. The musicians poured every last ounce of themselves into the music, their instruments vibrating with raw emotion. The glitch vanished. The interference stopped. The Velanthi had failed. As the final note echoed through the theater, the audience, both in the room and around the world, sat in stunned silence. Then slowly, applause began to ripple through the crowd, building into a thunderous roar. People cheered, wept, hugged strangers. They knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, something that couldn't be replicated or owned. Elena stood on the edge of the stage, tears in her eyes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had accomplished. They had created something the Velanthi couldn't touch, something that defied ownership. They had reminded the world, and the aliens, that creativity was not a product, it was life itself. Leo slung his guitar over his back and grinned at her. "Told you we could pull it off." Elena laughed through her tears, feeling lighter than she had in days. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, she felt hope. They had won, at least for now. The performance ended, but the moment lingered. For a few breathless seconds, the audience, both in the theater and across the world, sat in silence, absorbing what they had just witnessed. It wasn't just art, it was defiance, a line drawn in the sand, and everyone who saw it knew something had shifted, something big. Leo leaned over to Elena, wiping sweat from his brow with a grin. "Think they got the message?" Elena gave a shaky laugh. "If they didn't, they're deaf and dead inside." But she knew the real challenge was just beginning. The notification on her phone confirmed it. The Velanthi are requesting an emergency diplomatic meeting. Of course they were. An hour later, Elena found herself standing in the UN's high-ceilinged conference hall once more. The diplomats filed in slowly, still buzzing from the performance. Many of them had watched it live and were rattled by what they saw. Rattled because, for the first time, they realized the stakes weren't just theoretical. The art had shown them something they hadn't been able to put into words before. And now the Velanthi were here to respond. Ambassador Velanthi glided into the room with his two fellow envoys in tow, his serene expression unbroken. But Elena could see the tension in his movement, just a twitch of his hands, a slight hesitation in his step. The performance had affected him too. "We have witnessed your creation," Velanthi said, addressing the diplomats with his usual calm. His voice carried a strange weight, as if each word were balancing on the edge of a knife. It was extraordinary. Elena folded her arms, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "But," Velanthi continued, "it changes nothing." A collective murmur swept through the room. "Your art is beautiful, but beauty is fleeting. Creativity, like any resource, must be harnessed, organized, controlled. Left untamed, it is wasteful." He paused, his dark eyes scanning the room. "The offer still stands. Exchange your culture for technology, and we will guarantee humanity's survival." Leo, seated at the back of the room, let out a derisive snort. "Guarantee survival? That's rich." Elena felt anger bubble up inside her. "You don't get it, do you?" she said, stepping forward before the diplomats could stop her. The performance wasn't just art. It was a message. You can't own what's alive. You can't steal something that has to be freely given. Veltak's expression didn't shift, but Elena saw something flicker in his eyes, an unease, a crack in his perfect composure. "The civilizations you've drained," she continued, her voice growing stronger, "they didn't just lose their art, they lost themselves. You didn't just take their creations, you killed their spark. And that's what you want to do to us." The room fell into stunned silence. The other diplomats exchanged uneasy glances. Some of them had been leaning toward signing the deal. But now, with Elena's words hanging in the air, doubt crept in. "Without creativity," she said, "what's the point of survival? What's the point of having clean energy or miracle cures? Or faster-than-light travel if there's nothing left to dream about?" She locked eyes with Velanthi. "You offer us everything, but you leave us with nothing." Veltak's calm demeanor wavered. "We offer you order. We offer you a future free from chaos and uncertainty." "No," Leo cut in, standing now, his voice full of conviction. "What you're offering isn't a future, it's a cage, and we'd rather struggle and create in freedom than live perfectly under your control." For the first time, Velanthi looked uncertain, as if something in Leo's words had hit a nerve. "You don't understand," Velanthi whispered, almost to himself. "Without control, we lost everything. Our civilization collapsed under the weight of unchecked imagination. That is why we must take yours. It is the only way we can survive." There it was, the truth, finally laid bare. The Velanthi hadn't just lost their creativity, they had been destroyed by it, and they were terrified of letting that happen again. Their obsession with ownership wasn't greed, it was fear. Elena felt a strange mix of pity and resolve. "We get it," she said softly, "but controlling creativity doesn't make you safe. It just kills the thing you're afraid of." The room fell silent again, and then one by one the diplomats began to speak up. "The deal is off," declared the Secretary General, his voice steady. "We will not trade our soul for technology. We'd rather solve our problems the hard way," added President Ramirez of Brazil, "on our own terms." Ambassador Veltak's face tightened, but he gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Then you have made your choice." He turned to leave, his companions following close behind, but at the doorway he hesitated. "You were right about one thing," Velanthi said, looking back at Elena. "We cannot own what is alive, but be warned, without creativity, without imagination, even the most advanced civilization crumbles." And with that, the Velanthi were gone, leaving behind only an uneasy silence. The meeting ended soon after, the diplomats filing out in groups, some still processing what had just happened, others feeling a weight lifted from their shoulders. Humanity had stood its ground, but the future was still uncertain. The problems the Velanthi had promised to solve, climate change, disease, scarcity, were still waiting for answers. Elena and Leo stood outside the building, watching the sun rise over the skyline. The air felt crisp, alive with possibility. "We still have a lot of work to do," Elena said, leaning against the railing. "Yeah," Leo agreed, pulling his guitar case over his shoulder. "But at least it's our work." Elena smiled, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The world wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but that was the point, wasn't it? Imperfection was where creativity thrived. "So what now?" Leo asked, glancing at her with a grin. Got another poem in you? Elena laughed. Maybe. Or maybe we start something bigger. A movement. Make sure no one ever forgets what happened here. Leo gave her a playful nudge. You mean we turn this whole thing into a story? Exactly, Elena said, her eyes bright with determination. Because stories are how we survive. They're how we remember who we are. They stood there for a moment longer, watching the city wake up around them. In the distance, the sound of a street musician's saxophone drifted through the air, a small but defiant song carrying through the morning light. Elena closed her eyes and smiled. The Velanthi were gone. The future was uncertain, but as long as there were stories to tell, music to play, and dreams to chase, humanity would be just fine.